Hey guys, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. Today's Monday, so it's our history piece today, and I'm basically going to start from the very beginning of when I started to abuse drugs and alcohol, give you guys some of the key symptoms of my problem with addiction that started at a really early age for me. So basically, addiction started early on for me. I was about 12 or so when I started smoking cigarettes, and that was something that I immediately gravitated towards, really enjoyed. And by the time I was 14, I started drinking alcohol, smoking marijuana, and I was smoking cigarettes regularly at this point. I really had kind of started to go into my rebellious phase and really gravitated towards those kids that were doing those things, and I was all about it. So by the time I was 14, I was drinking quite a bit. I was smoking a lot of marijuana, and I was regularly smoking cigarettes. This kind of it was a pattern that I displayed on and off throughout my later teenage years. From about 14 to 18, I would go through a really rough patch. I would do these things a lot, kind of rebel more, then I'd settle down, get back to my school, try to do well, so on and so forth. It was kind of a roller coaster ride. By the time I was 18, I graduated high school, was moving out with my best friend from high school, and the party was on. We were all about having a good time, drinking lots of alcohol, and experimenting with lots of drugs. It was definitely my time for experimentation. I tried ecstasy for the first time, tried cocaine. We actually had some guys moving downstairs from us, right below us in our apartment, that sold cocaine. They showed up to one of our parties, and it was on from then. I hate using this term, but I think that coke was my gateway drug. It really opened the door to me for other drugs. I think that I kind of lowered my inhibitions at that point. I was ready to move on to bigger and better things after that. It triggered that part of my brain that says I want more, and it was kind of just on from then. We did a lot of drinking, a lot of partying. It went from, just on the weekends to then we were having parties on Tuesday nights. I mean, it became a more regular thing. And by the time I was 19, I had met a guy and fell madly in love, and he had a problem with opiate pills. And even throughout my entire history of using and abusing drugs up until this point, I was not aware that people did prescription medications to get high. I had no idea that that was a thing. So the signs that he had a problem with them completely went over my head. I had no idea that that was something that people did. So at the point that I finally figured out that he had a problem with these pills, I had already become really curious about it. And because it was something he did, I was a young and dumb teenager, I needed to try it too. And this kind of opened up my whole entire world to serious drug abuse. I started doing Oxycontin pills every day. My body became fully dependent on them very quickly, and that is when the spiral of my drug abuse really started. Things got really bad really fast. I started to perform poorly at my job. I needed these pills to be able to stay well, to do any kind of function. And to be honest, my boyfriend at the time had warned me. He had told me, this is not something that you want to get into. But by this point, I think the addict in my brain had already been triggered, and I was really curious about it. And I think that curiosity could have been better put in other places, but at that point, that's where it went, and I just wanted to learn more about it. I wanted to know how to feel good, and I wanted to have more and more fun. Little did I know that this fun at the time would end up being the most miserable situation of my entire life, and would lead me down a road of complete and total destruction. I was completely naive to this fact, and I think that that's kind of an important thing to remember, because I think that the education on these things for young people is extremely important. I don't think that they understand, at least some of them don't know what they're really getting into when they decide to try this or that for the first time. I mean, it really does open up a door, and for those of us who have addictive tendencies or addictive problems, it unleashes the monster within us and can end, potentially really badly. So, yes, Oxycontin was the beginning of my spiral downward. It's what got me addicted to opiates, and I eventually found myself in a situation where I'm addicted to Oxy. I have no job anymore, and I find out that my boyfriend and I are pregnant. So the story gets a little juicier. I'm gonna leave you guys off here for now, and I'm gonna get back to the rest of the story from this point forward on next Monday's video. So as we said in our last video, Mondays are a history piece. Thursdays are going to be what we're doing for this protocol as far as my recovery goes, what's been working really well for me. So I really hope that you guys check in with us then again for Thursday, and then again next Monday for where where I'm leaving off today. I'm gonna start up again on next Monday and explain to you what happened once I found out I was pregnant with my beautiful daughter, who's now 7 years old, Arabella. Anyways, my mom's gonna give her piece now, so I hope you guys listen to that. And thank you again so much for checking in. This has been a really fun and exciting thing so far, and we love that you guys are watching. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ann, Anna's mom. And I'm going to start my part of the story today back before I knew Anna was using. When she was 18, she got an apartment with a friend from school, and she seemed to be doing well. We were all really glad. She'd had a very, very tumultuous adolescence, and she seemed to have kind of evened out and was happy. She had a job. She was working at Mary Maid's, and within just a very short period of time, she was promoted to supervisor, and that seemed to be going well. After a little while, she started complaining or talking with me a bit about her friend who'd been using a lot of over-the-counter drugs, abusing him. And Anna seemed really worried about her, and I was worried about her too. And then I didn't hear too much more about that for a while. And then Anna met a new young man and started dating him, and she was so happy. And I was really worried. I didn't know this young man. I knew his family, his mom and his sisters, and great people. I really liked them, but I knew that he had a history of drug abuse and addiction and was struggling with that. So that made me really nervous. It also made me really surprised because Anna has always been very, very anti-drug up to this point. But she was in love, and he was very much in love with her. That was clear. And I think she thought she could save him. So it wasn't very long before they were in their own apartment together, and then they moved to another house, and they were very much in love. But life there seemed very tumultuous. Like, there was a lot of drama. They didn't seem to be able to keep a car running. They didn't seem to be able to keep hold of their valuables and their personal belongings. There just seemed to be a lot of drama. And they were around. They lived close to me, and that was great. I got to see them a lot, and I did grow to love this young man very much, but he was a mess. And Anna was quickly becoming a mess as well. She started having anxiety attacks, or at least that's what I think they were. One day, she called me when I was at work, and she was hysterical. She'd been driving from one job to another for work, and was pulled over on this side of the freeway, just unable to drive anymore, crying hysterically, freaking out, unable to articulate exactly what the problem was. So I left work and grabbed one of my best friends, and we went out and rescued her, and got her car home and got her put back together, and talked to her about seeing a therapist for something like this. But she had never been interested in therapy since she was a kid. So I was pretty worried. This happened a few more times, and after this second or third time, I actually took her to a psychiatrist who gave her some antidepressants, and I don't know if she ever took them or not, but things didn't really seem to be getting very much better. Both of them made plenty of money. Their life should have looked really good, and it just seemed to be constantly a mess, and it was a lot of real high highs and a lot of really low lows. I was concerned that she was dealing with some kind of mental illness. It runs both sides of her parents' families, so that could have been an issue. She was diagnosed as bipolar when she was 12 or 13, I don't know if that was an accurate diagnosis, but it was, somebody thought there was something going on there. But Anna had been through a lot of trauma. When her dad and I split up, we had a really nasty divorce. It was really unfortunate. And Anna was the oldest of the three girls and saw and heard and probably experienced the most of her father and I not being our best selves in that space. And I think that was really hard on her. And thankfully, he and I get along great now. And that's wonderful for all of the girls. But back then it was really hard. And I think that hurt her. And when she was 12, a distant family member molested her. She came to me right away. And of course, we all were just, really upset about it. And we believed her immediately and took action. One of those pieces of action was to send her to a therapist. And we found somebody through a friend who thought he was great. And she started seeing him. And after 2-3 months, he called me in and said that he felt that Anna was not being truthful about the incidents that she had reported about being molested, and that she did not fit the pattern of somebody who'd undergone some sort of molestation, and that she did fit a pattern of somebody who was basically lying to get attention, possibly a bipolar disorder fantasy or something like that. That was really upsetting because I'd believed her and I thought it was true. And, this guy had come highly recommended. So at that point, I didn't really know what to believe, but we kind of believed him. And then I was really concerned about her mental health. But several years later, we found out that this therapist was an absolute fraud. All of his documentation about his degrees and that sort of thing were bogus and fraudulent, and he had hurt a lot of families. He didn't know what he was talking about. And we also found out that this distant family member had been in this kind of trouble before. We hadn't been able to uncover that information because it had been in a different state. But Anna dealt with having something absolutely horrible happen to her and then being betrayed by the people she loved the most and went to for help. So that was pretty awful. And I was really worried that had an impact on it. And then later we found out that she had been molested again by another distant family member from 14 through 15. Anyway, she'd undergone a lot. When she was 16 years old, she got pregnant. And she decided to have the baby and give her up for adoption, which I think was really amazing. And she carried that little one with grace, so much grace and so much love. She called her passenger. And we found a beautiful family, and we met them and got to know them a bit, who adopted her. And she was born over 9 pounds. My 16-year-old daughter had this huge, giant, beautiful baby. The family was there in the hospital, and Mom and Dad picked her up from there. And I know what it felt like for me to let that first grandchild go to a very beautiful, loving home where she's thriving to this day. But I couldn't imagine what it was like for Anna. And she refused all counseling. She would not talk about it to anybody. And I was really worried that all of these factors were playing a huge role in what was going on with her then. I thought it was leading her into some sort of mental illness or emotional breakdown. I still believe that a lot of those factors are what drove her to use. Anyway, Anna and this young man continued to live together and clearly try really hard to be happy. And at one point, Anna ended up in the hospital with a kidney infection. And I went to see her in the hospital and talked with her and the both of them there. And found out that Anna had been using cocaine. which I was really, really surprised about, actually. Probably shouldn't have been looking back, but really surprised about. She was in not very good health and had managed to let a bladder infection go long enough that it turned into a very serious kidney infection, and she had to be hospitalized for several days. That was a really big red flag, but I couldn't reach her. She wouldn't talk to me about anything and denied any, of my concerns that there was anything weird going on. So I was really concerned. And a couple years into their relationship, in fact, right after I got married, and Anna and this young man showed up at the wedding high as kites, and it was obvious they were. Actually, shortly after we got home from our honeymoon, Anna came and told us that she was pregnant again. So that's where we will leave off today. We'll have more of the story from both of us next Monday. We'll see you on Thursday if you tune in again, and we'll talk about some of the things that we are doing that have been really helping Annalise to recover her health. Thank you.